Welcome to the first installment of the American Made series. This is Pepsi versus Coke, and this is the Pepsi portion. For those who are part of the Pepsi generation or lived through the Cola Wars, is it hard to imagine a time when you couldn't reach for a cold, refreshing Pepsi on a hot summer day? But there was such a time when Pepsi wasn't available to go with your warm, cheesy pizza or your movie theater popcorn. Thanks to a man named Caleb Bradham, people have now enjoyed Pepsi for over 128 years. Caleb Bradham was born in New Bern, North Carolina in 1862, the son of a Syrian immigrant and a North Carolinian woman. He grew up helping his dad in a grocery store where he learned the value of honest trade. Caleb dreamed of being a doctor. He enrolled in the University of North Carolina and later transferred to the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Baltimore at the University of Maryland. However, before he was able to complete his studies, he received word that his dad's business was failing and Caleb was needed at home. Caleb altered his dream, but he did not forfeit it altogether. He used the knowledge that he had gained, and he used that to acquire an apprenticeship with a pharmacist. He learned all that he could and later opened his own pharmacy. His pharmacy was a place where people would come to socialize. They especially enjoyed tasting Caleb's fizzy concoctions. He would mix up various combinations, hoping to find something that would act as cures for various ailments. One of the favorites was one they had come to know as Brad's drink. This was a drink that Bradham had created with carbonated water, sugar, vanilla, oils, and cola nuts. The drink would be marketed as a cure for stomach aches or dyspepsia. On August 28, 1898, the drink would be named Pepsi Cola, after the pepsin and the cola nuts used in the recipe. The crates it was distributed in were marked with their new logo and the words delicious and healthful. This was significant in a day when chemicals like opium, cocaine, and even arsenic were commonly used in foods and beverages. Bradham so believed in his product that when pressured to alter the recipe in order to lower production costs, he flat out refused. He was determined to maintain the therapeutic properties of his drink. He also refused to entertain any suggestion to use a low-grade sugar in order to lower costs. He insisted that the high-grade sugar was necessary. Here's a fun fact. A church located across the street from Bradham's drugstore claimed the name Pepsi Cola was an anagram for Episcopal. But the PepsiCo company stated recently that this was not accurate. It is stated that just because Britney Spears is an anagram for Presbyterian doesn't mean this fact has any other significance. To promote Pepsi Cola, Caleb set up stands at county fairs and other community events. He believed that if he could get it out to the people, they would taste it and fall in love with it, and it worked. The drink gained popularity, and Bradham soon found that he needed to devote all his time and energy in developing his cola into a full-fledged business. He applied for a trademark with the U.S. Patent Office in 1902 and formed the first Pepsi Cola company. In 1903, the sales of the beverages increased. Bradham moved the bottling company from the top of his pharmacy to a rented warehouse. He would sell 7,968 gallons of Pepsi Cola in the very first year. The tagline for the beverage was transformed from delicious and helpful to exhilarating, invigorating, aids digestion. It may not be as catchy as some of their future advertisements, but it clearly stated the properties that Bradham wanted to highlight about his drink. In 1906, Pepsi received a new logo, the third in 8 years. The script logo was created with the slogan, "The original pure food," and there were now 15 bottling plants in the U.S. It is in this year that the federal government passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, banning substances like arsenic, lead, barium, and uranium from food and beverages. This forced soft drink manufacturers to alter their formulas. Pepsi's main rival, Coca-Cola, is among those that had to make changes to their recipes, but Pepsi did not, as it was free of impurities and already met the new federal regulations. At the turn of the 20th century, the sugar market changed as weather, trade policies, and global demand altered it. During World War II, shipments from Cuba and other sugar-producing companies were disrupted, and prices soared. Bradham saw the change and feared that he would run out of his key ingredient, so he decided to buy at high prices in order to increase his stock before sugar became unavailable. Newspapers dubbed him the Sugar King and praised his business acumen. But then the war ended, and shipping lanes reopened. Sugar prices fell drastically, dropping from 30 cents a pound to 6 cents a pound. Excess sugar flooded the market, and Braddock found himself with no way to unload sugar without losing money. This misstep led to the company going into receivership. Pepsi Cola Company declared bankruptcy. Its assets were sold to pay off company debts. Bradham returned to his pharmacy. While his company failed, Bradham remained a beloved citizen of New Bern until his death in 1934. He was remembered for his generosity and his creation of a taste that was unforgettable. That creation continued on. It was sold to a North Carolina concern, Craven Holding Corporation, for $30,000 in 1923. Later that year, Roy C. McGurgle purchased the logo and the business at auction from the holding company for $35,000. McGurgle had 5 years of losing rather than gaining profits from the company. In 1928, in an effort to turn the tide, he reorganized the company as the National Pepsi Company, the National Pepsi Cola Company, making it the fourth parent company to own the Pepsi trademark, but his efforts failed. The National Pepsi Cola Company filed for bankruptcy in 1931. It was again purchased, this time by Loft Candy Company. Charles G. Guff was president of Loft, and he took control of Pepsi. Guff was the owner of a chain of candy shops and soda fountains. He had become increasingly agitated as Coca-Cola continued to raise its prices. So he decided that he would buy Pepsi and start his own soda company. His first action was to reformulate the formula. Though he was not a chemist, Guff had been in the candy and soda business for years and knew what people liked. He began to experiment with the formula. Under his hand, the formula was made sweeter and more robust. When he found the taste he was looking for, he began bottling Pepsi right above his candy store. Another change was to the bottle's appearance. Guff used a red and white and blue logo to promote the feeling of patriotism within the consumer. He also altered the bottle itself. Coke sold a 6.5-ounce bottle for a nickel. Guff created a 12-ounce bottle and sold it for a nickel. This made a huge difference for families in the Depression era. They could get almost double the product for the same price. Added to this move was a jingle created to flaunt the difference. Pepsi Cola hits the spot. 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel too? Pepsi Cola is the drink for you. This was the first jingle to go on the radio. These changes were brilliant. Pepsi sales rose quickly from the few thousand to millions. It began to look like Pepsi might overtake Coke for the first time. Coke, being challenged for top spot, reminded their distributors to be loyal. Businesses that stocked Pepsi would possibly find their deliveries delayed or even cut off. The Cola Wars had begun with a battle for shelf space. In 1938, Guff resigned and Walter S. Mack Jr. was elected president of the Pepsi Cola Company. Mack believed that advertising was the key. The focus of their marketing went from cost to image. Mack believed that the 12-ounce bottle had served its purpose. He felt the emphasis made Pepsi look like a drink for poor people. He wanted to change that perspective. Mack introduced a narrower, more elegant bottle. He also added red, white, and blue to the bottle crown in 1941 to show support for the war effort. Another change in 1941, Pepsi stock was sold for the first time on the New York Stock Exchange. Despite a rationing of sugar and glass during the war years, Pepsi was able to hold on. The years after the war brought an economic boom and assembly lines. Another change was youth culture. Teens were listening to rock and roll and spending money on their own terms. They were looking for products that reflected their generation. Enter Alfred N. Steele. Steele is the new president and CEO of Pepsi-Cola. Steele, a former high-ranking executive from the Coca-Cola Company, brought with him his knowledge of Coca-Cola and the glamour of Hollywood, as his wife was actress Joan Crawford. Steele set out to change the image of Pepsi to something other than just an alternative to Coke. He wanted to create a product for the new generation. He shortened the bottle, raised the price to match Coke's, and invested a lot of money into advertising. The new ads would feature young couples dancing at barbecues and having fun, always with a Pepsi in hand. Joan also did her part for the company. She posed for ads and attended bottling conventions, using her popularity to promote Pepsi-Cola. As a side note, in 1959, Joan would become the first woman on the Pepsi board. It was Alan Potash who developed the Pepsi Generation ad campaign. He studied young adults and teens, noting their clothing, music, and social norms. He recognized that this new generation did not want to be lectured to, they wanted to have a voice. In 1963, Donald M. Kendall was named CEO of the Pepsi-Cola Company. A new slogan, "Come alive, you're the Pepsi generation," was introduced. The 12-ounce bottle became a 16-ounce bottle. 12-ounce cans were introduced in order to ship Pepsi to military bases. Ads contained the vibrant colors and upbeat music. Jingles like, "It's a Pepsi generation coming at you, going strong." The ads resonated with the teens and young adults of the era as they saw themselves in them. Pepsi began to soar. To connect further with youth, Pepsi also began sponsoring rock concerts, TV specials, and aligned itself with icons like the Beach Boys and the British Invasion bands. In 1964, saw the introduction of Diet Pepsi, the first nationally distributed Diet Cola in the USA. This drink was advertised to women concerned about their figures. These ads tapped into the emerging fitness culture that would explode in the 70s. The same year, Pepsi bought Mountain Dew from the Tip Corp. Mountain Dew had been created as a mixer for whiskey in Tennessee. Pepsi introduced it as a citrusy, high-energy drink. Its first slogan was, "Yahoo Mountain Dew, it'll tickle your innards." The slogan was designed to appeal to rural and suburban youth. Mountain Dew quickly became a billion-dollar brand. Pepsi-Cola Company began to grow and expand. By 1965, they had their own bottling plants and distribution centers. They had also purchased Frito-Lay. From this merger, the new PepsiCo Incorporated was formed. Kendall saw this merger as a way to diversify with purpose. Drivers could distribute the soda along with the Fritos and Lay's potato chips. They even had promotions for buying the salty snacks and the sweet cola together. Shortly after this merger, Doritos by Frito-Lay were introduced to the consumers. You will all remember the Pepsi Challenge. It became a major marketing tool for PepsiCo in 1975. People would be stopped in the street, in grocery stores, and at events, and asked if they would like to take the Pepsi Challenge. Those that participated would do blind taste tests of Coke and Pepsi. This was a great way to promote the idea that choosing a cola was a matter of personal choice rather than loyalty to a brand. The company would continue to diversify as CEOs changed. PepsiCo would begin to add fast food chains to their portfolios. This was in an effort to create markets where only Pepsi was offered. Pizza Hut was added in 1977, Taco Bell in 1978, and KFC in 1986. By the late 1980s, the restaurant business accounted for half of the company's revenue. Another notable acquisition in addition to PepsiCo's product line were Grandma's Cookies, which were added to the Frito-Lay division in 1980. Crystal Pepsi, Slice, Wild Cherry Pepsi, those were introduced in the 80s. Mug Root Beer was acquired in 1986. Sun Chips were introduced in 1991 as a healthier alternative to regular chips. In the 80s, Pepsi advertising contains celebrity endorsements from people like Ray Charles and Michael Jackson. Remember him getting caught on fire? During this time, Coke was using their iconic polar bears for advertising. The 90s saw more expansion, acquisitions, and changes. Pepsi introduced Aquafina water and Pure Leaf iced tea. Tropicana, Quaker Oats, and Gatorade were added to the PepsiCo lineup. Packaging changed and cameras were added to bottling plants after a rumor that syringes were found in Coke bottles. The claim was proven false, but the security measures still remain. In 1997, the restaurant side of the company was separated, becoming Tricon Global and later the Yum brand. The 2000s added Rockstar, Beer Foods, Apple Chips, Popcorners, and BFY, which is better for you snacks, which started as a digestive aid in a small pharmacy, has grown into an icon and a major employer and producer. I had to add this last slide. I think it's ingenious that now Pepsi's newest ads include the iconic Coke Polar Bear taking the Pepsi challenge and choosing Pepsi.
Okay, so I'm going to do the history of the Coca-Cola Company. Dr. John Pemberton, a pharmacist in Atlanta, was seeking an opioid substitute. He had been a Confederate cavalry officer who was injured in the Civil War from a saber to the torso. He recovered from the injury but had become addicted to morphine. Coca-Cola was created with the hope that this could be his answer. Originally, it was marketed as a tonic to cure everything from headaches to hangovers. The syrup was a mix of caffeine from the African cola nut and a small amount of cocaine extracted from a coca leaf, which was a common ingredient then. The cocaine was removed from the recipe in 1903. On May 8, 1886, he took his syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy, where it was mixed with soda water. The pharmacy added it to its soda fountain choices and sold it for 5 cents a glass. Pemberton's bookkeeper and business partner, Frank M. Robinson, suggested the name Coca-Cola, thinking the 2 C's would look well in advertising. Robinson also penned the now famous trademark in his unique script. Pemberton never realized the value of his creation. He gradually sold off bits of the company to various partners until just before his death in 1888, when he sold what remained of the company to Asa Candler, an Atlanta native with a great business sense. Candler bought the business for $2,300 and grew it exponentially. Coke, as a fountain drink, grew from an average of 9 drinks per day sold in 1886 to being sold in every U.S. state by 1900. The problem was, if people wanted to enjoy a Coke, they had to go to a soda fountain to purchase the drink. The first bottling of the product began in 1894 in Vicksburg, Mississippi, but large-scale bottling did not happen until 2 Chattanooga lawyers, Joseph Whitehead and Benjamin Thomas, wanted to capitalize on the drink's popularity in 1899 by bottling Coke so that people may enjoy it in the comfort of their home. They signed a geographic contract, and the Coca-Cola Bottling Company began franchising rights to bottle in cities across the country. By 1920, over 1,200 operations were in business. Sales in both bottles and fountain drinks continued to climb. Coca-Cola's business model was to make its money by manufacturing the syrup. The bottlers were largely independent businesses. Competitors wanted a piece of the market without coming up with any original ideas. They tried to imitate the trademark to deceive the public. The company took these scam artists to court, but litigation took years. At the time, bottles were typically brown or clear with straight edges. But competitors like Coca-Nola, Macoca-Co, Toca-Cola, and Coke with a K slightly modified the bottles to trick consumers. In 1906, Coke tried to add that diamond shape, the diamond-shaped label to their bottles, but because the bottles were usually sold out of barrels of ice, the labels would get wet and they'd peel off. Bottlers appealed to the company to help them battle these losses, but there was little else the company could do other than the lawsuits. On April 26, 1915, the trustees of the Coca-Cola Bottling Association voted to spend up to $500 to develop a distinctive bottle. Glass companies across the U.S. were challenged to create a bottle so distinct you'd recognize it in the dark. The Root Glass Company in Terre Haute accepted the challenge. They sent team members to a local library to research possible designs. When they found an illustration of a cocoa bean, they had their inspiration. The patent submission was made without the signature embossing to protect the secrecy around the project. In early 1916, the Root version was declared the clear winner and the iconic Coke bottle was born. The contract called for bottles to be colored with German green, which later became known as Georgia green. The name of the city placing the glassware also was embossed on the bottom of the bottles, which entertained kids with games about who had a bottle that had traveled the farthest. Patents expire after 14 years and can only be renewed so many times. By 1951, all the bottle's patents had expired. However, the Coca-Cola Company argued to the patent office that the shape was so distinctive it should be granted trademark status, which is highly unusual for commercial packaging. Yet on April 12, 1961, the bottle was recognized as a trademark, in part because more than 99% of Americans could identify a bottle of Coke just by the shape alone. In 1906, the company expanded with bottling in Canada, Cuba, and Panama. In 1916, Asa Candler was elected mayor of Atlanta. To avoid potential conflicts of interest, Candler stepped down from daily management. In 1917, Candler gifted almost all of his stock in the company to his 5 children, effectively giving them their inheritances early. His children were said to be uninterested in running the company and preferred the liquidity of a sale. The eldest brother, Howard, had been serving as company president, but he was not the businessman his father was. The other siblings began to resent his control. Meanwhile, the company was bogged down by litigation, including battles with the Federal Trade Commission and government efforts to remove caffeine from Coke's formula. Glad that didn't happen. Enter Ernest Woodruff, who led a group of investors that offered the Candler siblings $25 million, which was the largest business transaction in the South at that point. The Candlers accepted the offer, which deeply saddened Asa, since he had hoped his family would maintain the business for generations. Perhaps fearing his reaction, his children did not tell him about the sale in advance. He found out by reading about it in the newspaper. Because he had already signed over the legal control, he had no recourse regarding their decision. Yet Candler is responsible for taking his $2,300 investment and growing it into a company worth $25 million. When Ernest Woodford took over the company, his son Robert was employed by the White Motor Company in Cleveland as a very successful truck salesman. Following the Candler exit, the company was plagued by debt and declining stock prices. Ernest and the board reached out to 33-year-old Robert in an effort to revive the business. Accepting meant Robert had to take a pretty significant pay cut, and he planned to stay long enough only to right the ship. However, once he was at the helm, Robert really found his calling. He would remain president of the company until 1954 and hold a seat on the board until 1984. Robert Woodruff was an advertising and marketing visionary who took the company from a national brand into a global powerhouse. His first major campaign was launched in 1922 to convince consumers Coke was a year-round drink, not just a summer drink. Woodruff was inspired after traveling through Canada when it was negative 35 degrees and he saw people drinking Coke inside a station. In 1925, Woodruff personally traveled to New York to retrieve the written secret formula where it had been held as loan collateral in a bank vault since 1919. He had brought the company enough money that they were able to get out of the loan. He adopted a philosophy his next major campaign in 1929 was The Pause That Refreshes, which is arguably the most famous in company history. It positioned Coke as that well-deserved break during the workday. He adopted a philosophy of making Coca-Cola available within an arm's reach of desire. He shifted the company's focus from just selling syrup to making certain there was quality and consistency in every bottle. He also created the Quality Drink campaign to train servicemen to ensure every fountain drink was served at exactly 34 degrees with crushed ice. Servicemen were a precursor to today's sales representatives. Coke servicemen carried thermometers. If a fountain served a Coke at 40 degrees, they were told to stop until they fixed their refrigeration. Woodruff said a warm Coke is a bad Coke. To coincide with his push for 34-degree drinks and new open-top coolers, the company launched the slogan Ice Cold Sunshine in 1932. He also decreed all delivery trucks should be the same shade of red, and he standardized the red disc sign in 1948. This recognizable icon told customers where they could get a Coke. Woodruff championed other innovations, such as the automatic fountain dispensers, which were introduced in the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. These dispensers automatically mixed the syrup and carbonated water to ensure a uniform taste. He introduced the 6-bottle pack, a novel idea at that time, which gave consumers an easy way to get Cokes into their homes. During World War II, General Eisenhower asked Woodruff to build bottling plants on the front lines of the war. Eisenhower wanted to give the soldiers a little taste of home to boost morale. Woodruff established 64 portable bottling plants, and it was a move that would solidify the company's global presence. Woodruff pledged that every soldier could get a Coke for a nickel. Post-World War II, Coke adopted the slogan, "Where there's Coke, there's hospitality," in 1948, and focused on the brand's role in American life post-war. Woodruff's advertising genius also changed Christmas as we all know it. Before 1931, Santa Claus was depicted in a variety of ways. He could be tall, gaunt, wearing green or brown. What better way to convince people that Coke was a drink for all seasons than to serve it up to Santa? In the early 1930s, Coca-Cola hired Haddon H. Sundblom, an ad artist with Darcy Agency. He drew inspiration from Clement Seymour's A Visit with St. Nicholas. He drew Santa as plump, jolly, and dressed in red and white. Although these colors already were associated with Santa somewhat, they happily matched Coke's colors. The Santa most of us know today was born in the ad Sundblom illustrated from 1931 to 1964. Later in 1965, the company once again changed Christmas forever. In the summer of '65, Coca-Cola reached out to Lee Mendelson, asking if he and Charles Schulz could create a Charlie Brown Christmas special that year. Schulz insisted the special include a full minute of Linus reading the Gospel of Luke and that the characters be voiced by real children, not actors. Coca-Cola sponsored the first airing of A Charlie Brown Christmas on December 9, 1965, and almost half of the TV audience that night tuned in. In 1993, they would do it again with CGI polar bears watching the northern lights while drinking Coke. This ad featured groundbreaking computer animation and became an instant classic. The polar bears would return for other Christmas promotions through the years, and then Pepsi used them in the Super Bowl this year. That was pretty funny. In 1943, Woodruff saw marketing genius and a rising star named Alfred Steele. Steele's defection is one of the most notorious in business history. Woodruff met Steele when he worked for the Darcy Agency on Coke's account. Impressed by Steele, Woodruff hired him away and made him VP of Marketing at the New York offices. Steele was a showman who awed people at sales meetings and bottlers' conventions with his Broadway-style productions. But he also understood the evolving soda market. Half of sales now were from home consumption. Steele understood the need to tailor advertising messages to housewives. Despite his immense talent, Steele also was very flawed. He came off as a bit crass to the conservative leadership at Coke. When underlings filled out his expense reports, he instructed them to total it up and add a 1 in front. In an attempt to rein him in, Woodruff moved him from New York to Atlanta in 1949. Steele hated it. Then Burke Nicholson, who was responsible for day-to-day decisions, slashed Steele's budget permanently while Steele was away to establish residency in Las Vegas to get a divorce. Not for Joan Crawford, they weren't married yet. Seeing the writing on the wall, Steele sought out other opportunities in New York and took a meeting with Pepsi. Pepsi gave him an opportunity to lead their flailing company, and Steele accepted. This not only shocked but scared his colleagues at Coke. Steele knew many of their secrets and all of their weaknesses. He didn't just leave, he made it his mission to take down Coca-Cola. Although he made Pepsi a serious rival of Coke's, he never got the chance to take Coke down. He died from a heart attack at only 57. As Robert Woodruff got ready to step down from his role as CEO in 1954, he handpicked William Robinson to lead the next phase of the company's expansion. Woodruff continued with innovations on his way down from the top seat. In 1955, he saw the introduction of the king size, which was 10 ounces, and family size, which was 26 ounces, bottles. And I got more than that at Casey's this morning. The first can also were introduced. Woodruff also introduced Fanta soda, orange soda. But Woodruff would continue to be an influential force on the board into the 1980s until his death in 1985 at the age of 95. Woodruff kept a quote on his desk that read, "There is no limit to what a man can do if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." To that end, he donated over $350 million to the Atlanta community, often in secret. William Robinson would only stay on as CEO until 1958. Lee Talley took over from 1958 to 1962. He oversaw the introduction of Sprite and the acquisition of Minute Maid. J. Paul Austin took the reins in 1962 and remained until 1981 and became one of the most transformative leaders in the company's history. He pushed product diversification, oversaw the launches of Tab and Fresca, aggressively expanded into foreign markets, began addressing environmental concerns regarding packaging, and dealt with the social issues of the civil rights movement in Atlanta. He shifted marketing focus to television and developed catchy jingles using pop stars like Ray Charles, The Who, and the Bee Gees. He also updated the look of Coke with the dynamic ribbon and presided over the famed It's the Real Thing campaign. He oversaw production of Coke's most famous commercial. The 1971 ad cost an astronomical $250,000 to produce, but Austin saw the value. Austin was right. The commercial with the jingle, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," became one of the most famous commercials in TV history. The jingle was so popular, it was re-recorded as the song "I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing" by the New Seekers and went to number 7 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart. At the time of Austin's presidency, Coke had a strict policy requiring executives to retire at the age of 65. Austin met this milestone in 1980, but he stayed on an extra year to ensure a smooth transition. During his final years as CEO, Austin began to suffer from the early stages of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, which made the management of a global company increasingly difficult for him. After vetting candidates for his successor, Austin surprised everyone by selecting Roberto Goizueta, who, rather than being a salesman or marketer by trade, was a chemist. Yet Goizueta was the one who was charged with leading Coke through the Cola Wars. Goizueta would also be the last president to have Robert Woodruff's personal stamp of approval, as Roberto would lead the company until 1997. Goizueta's first notable achievement was the successful launch of Diet Coke in 1982. Perhaps it was Goizueta's background in chemistry that led to his greatest blunder. In the 70s and early 80s, the massive marketing campaign, the Pepsi Challenge, gave blind taste tests where people consistently chose the sweeter taste of Pepsi over the spicier taste of Coke. By 1983, Pepsi had actually overtaken Coke in supermarket sales. Coke only remained number 1 because of their stronghold in restaurant and vending machine distribution. Coke's lead continued to erode year after year. In the 1940s, Coke held 60% of the soda market. By 1983, it had dropped substantially to under 24%. Goizueta believed creeping withdrawal was the company's greatest threat, and the Coca-Cola Company was in serious danger of becoming the number 2 brand. Goizueta decided they needed to take drastic steps to make sure this did not happen. The first step was tinkering with the secret formula to make Coke sweeter, like Pepsi. The company spent over $4 million conducting research involving blind taste tests with nearly 200,000 consumers, and they achieved the results they had hoped for. People preferred the taste of new Coke over both original Coke and Pepsi. Goizueta believed they had a winner. The new formula was a way to put Coke definitively back on top. It should have worked, but they made one serious error. The researchers asked consumers if they liked the new taste. They never polled to see how people would feel about ditching the old formula altogether. The advertising geniuses before them had done such a stellar job of embedding Coke into the collective consciousness that the new regime failed to fully consider the deep emotional attachment that people had for the brand. New Coke was launched on April 23, 1985. Goizueta believed that he was demonstrating the company's innovative ability to attract the next generation of soda drinkers by modernizing the brand, but the backlash was immediate and strong. In the days before social media, people flooded the company with angry phone calls, totaling 1,500 each day and bags of hate mail to go with it. The response was so fierce that the company famously backtracked just 79 days later. They brought back the original formula and called it Coca-Cola Classic. While keeping new Coke on the shelves, this controversial switch generated so much publicity that sales of Coke Classic went through the roof. Although the company has always denied it, some have theorized that the whole disaster was just a clever marketing ploy. But the company did not discard new Coke completely just yet. They launched the Catch the Wave campaign featuring Max Headroom to promote new Coke. This futuristic campaign was designed to appeal to the MTV crowd and prove that Coke wasn't some stodgy old company. The campaign worked to get people talking about the brand overall, but it didn't save new Coke. In 1990, the product was renamed Coke 2, but ultimately it was pulled from the market entirely in July of 2002. New Coke was not the first time the secret formula had been modified. In fact, urban legend blames New Coke for being a cover to make the switch, but in truth, this happened 6 months before the launch of New Coke. I'm talking about the transition from using cane sugar to high fructose corn syrup. The change was phased in gradually and driven by economics. In 1980, bottlers were allowed to use up to 50% of corn syrup. In February of 1984, it increased to 75%. By November of 84, it was 100%. The reason? It was the volatility of sugar prices and supply, an issue Coke had struggled with on and off throughout their years, especially during war times. In the 1970s, sugar prices skyrocketed due to supply issues and market manipulation. High fructose corn syrup provided a domestic option. The U.S. government put heavy tariffs on foreign sugar while providing massive subsidies to corn farmers, resulting in artificial inflation of sugar while keeping corn prices excessively low. Corn syrup also is easier to transport, mixes more consistently, and provides a longer shelf life. Yet Coca-Cola was hesitant to make the change, fearing drinkers would notice the difference. The original sugar version never went away and still is produced in countries where sugar is cheaper than corn. While overall customers seem to accept the change, it did lead to the popularity of Mexican Coke in the U.S. today. Another surprising move by Goizueta was the purchase of Columbia Pictures in 1982 for $750 million. While it was not unusual for companies to diversify their holdings in the 80s, this seemed like an odd choice for Coke. Goizueta saw movies and Coke as things people enjoy in their free time, and therefore it made sense. Plus, it gave Coke an opportunity for product placement in hit movies like Ghostbusters and The Karate Kid. The company even won the Best Picture Academy Award for Gandhi. Ultimately, the movie business was much more volatile than the soda business. So in 1989, Coke sold Columbia to Sony for $3.4 billion. It proved to be a wise investment, nearly quintupling their investment in only 7 years. As the Cola Wars raged on in the late 80s, Coke enlisted celebrity endorsements from Whitney Houston, Paula Abdul, George Michael, and New Kids on the Block. In 1990, Coca-Cola sponsored the New Kids Magic Summer Tour. This was a massive cultural event and part of Coca-Cola's Magic Summer 90 campaign. It was one of the largest tours of the era, hitting over 100 cities in North America and Europe. The tour was associated with Coke's Magic Hands promotion, where some cans contained cash or prize certificates instead of soda. The cans looked identical to real cans, but there was a spring-loaded mechanism and a foul-smelling liquid, which was intended to keep people from drinking the prize water. They had to fill water in the cans so that the cans felt the same as the regular cans. And it turns out there was one kid in Boston who drank the prize water, an 11-year-old boy, and he got taken to the hospital, but upon examination, they said there was less chlorine in the prize water than there was in a swimming pool. He was fine. So, but it resulted in all kinds of, chaos. The cans weren't always working correctly, so this whole campaign was pulled in 3 months. They couldn't recall the cans though because they looked exactly like the regular cans, so They were just floating out there all summer. But they didn't, it was supposed to be, they were giving away like $15 million in prizes, and that didn't happen. Anyways, the company introduced a successful cherry Coke in 1991. In 1993, Goizueta oversaw the launch of the Always Coca-Cola campaign, the genius of which allowed for micro-targeting. Coke could create specific ads for different demographics rather than one catch-all ad. This campaign lasted until 2000. Several CEOs have come and gone since Goizueta's retirement. The company launched Coke Zero in 2005 to cater to health-conscious consumers, and it remains focused exclusively on beverages now. Today, the Coca-Cola Company owns Diet Coke, Fanta, Sprite, Fresca, Body Armor, Dasani, Powerade, Smart Water, Topo Chico, Gold Peak Tea, Minute Maid, Simply Juices, and over 200 brands worldwide. When asked about why he chose Coca-Cola bottles in his artwork, Andy Warhol once said, "What's great about this country is that America started the tradition where the richest consumers buy essentially the same things as the poorest. You can be watching TV and see Coca-Cola, and you know that the president drinks Coke, Liz Taylor drinks Coke, and just think, you can drink Coke too. A Coke is a Coke, and no amount of money can get you a better Coke than the one the bum on the corner is drinking. All the Cokes are the same, and all the Cokes are good. Liz Taylor knows it, the president knows it, the bum knows it, and you know it."